Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Sanders, and this is Watch Art Sci, the art and science of watch collection. Today, I want to talk about how to have a successful watch collection, and that sounds a fairly arrogant kind of thing to say, but let me talk about it, and I hope to clarify what I mean by that. Uh, First of all, let me start off with that we're talking about collecting mechanical watches. And a mechanical watch is the entire power is provided by a single or multiple mainspring. So that's the kind of watch I'm talking about. I'm not talking about an Apple Watch. I'm not talking about something like my Fitbit. I'm talking about a watch that moves around because the tension from a spring unwinds. All right, so let's take a look at this. Now, one of the first questions is that what makes a good mechanical watch? And one of the most important things is a constant force, and that's when the when you're unwinding the watch, when the spring is expanding, you want that to happen in a constant way. Now, if you've ever wound up a toy with a mechanical movement in it, it'll go really fast, and then when it starts running down, it'll something like that. And so, one of the problems with a watch, if that happens, of course, the time's going to be off. It'll go fast at the beginning and slow at the end, and you don't want that. You want a constant force. Well, one of the solutions is something that I learned early on. It's called a remontoir d'égalité. And it was something, it's a little device that's put into to a movement that basically rewinds itself every so many seconds or every second. And so it has a constant force. And it's powered by the mainspring, but it's different because it's called because it keeps rewinding. That's what makes it different. Whereas the mainspring just is a steady unwind. All right. Well, the one I have pictured there is from Lang and Hein, and it's like something like $70,000 for the particular watch. And at the Watch Time show, we were talking to Stephen Forsay, and I asked him about that, and I said, how come more watches don't have that? And he said it's very difficult to put in, and he explained why. And the more I understood it, the more I came to understand I'm probably never going to have a remontoir d'égalité unless one, get lucky or something, or somebody finds a way to have something that's going to be, something I can afford. And there was something about that it was sort of like, well, if I can't have one, what am I going to do? And the thing is, what I'm going to do is what every watch collectors do is that they have to sort of, well, not sort of, but absolutely live within their what they can afford. And after that, it was sort of almost like opening a curtain that the possibilities became even greater. I didn't have to have everything, uh, but what it would do, it would sort of lead me to find things. Well, if I can't have that, what's something like that I might be able to find? And that has proven to be sort of what I've been doing all along, and that's the fun part. Now, if you have a lot of money, and at one time I did, I made really dumb mistakes with a lot of money. If you don't have as much money, you can make dumb mistakes without a lot of money. So let's take a look at some of the things that, if you're going to have a watch collection, some of the things you might think about. Okay, well, and to me, constant force is one of the interesting things. It's not just like, oh, I got to have a watch that keeps perfect time because you got your iPhone or your computer or 1,000 different ways to have really accurate time. All right, so one of the things is the mainspring is what runs it, and they live in barrels, and so there are different kinds. So there's just a single barrel, and it unwinds, and that's your watch. Here's one that this one has a single barrel, and it runs for 7 days. So it's a good sized barrel for that. And it has to be timed, and a lot of other things that are going on to make it run right. Now, these three all have double barrels. The first one up in the upper left has a double barrel, and what it does is that the runs what's called in parallel, and they both turn the gear that starts the whole chain. And what this does is that there's less friction, and because there's less friction, you get a steadier flow of the chain. The one next to it, by the way, yeah, that's by FPG. And the one over on the right is by a company called Christopher Ward. And the thing that's neat about Christopher Ward is that they're far more affordable. Now, this one also uses a double barrel, but it has it in a sequence that's called serial. And the serial arrangement is so that when one of the barrels is finished unwinding, the other one starts. So it's sort of 1-2 kind of thing. And what this does, it gives you a longer charge, so you don't have to wind it as much. Now, another one I literally learned about today is called a laminar torque spring by a company called Osleon that I didn't know about. And it's the name of this particular watch is L'Instant de Vérité. I think it means a true instance. And what it does, it has two drums, and as one unwinds, the other one winds it, and so it keeps it nice and taut all the time. Now that one is, I think, $164,000 out of my range, but still interesting. The FP Jorn, the particular one is around between, I think the list price is around $30,000. Again, that's outside of most people's ranges. But the Christopher Ward isn't. That thing is, I don't know, a couple $1,000 maybe. And it has their SH, I think it's SH21 or something like that. They only have one, and they use it for different things. But that's affordable. And so, I was looking at that. I said, well, I'd rather have one than the other. And so when we begin to look at it that way, you can find some really neat stuff you can't afford, but it's still interesting. And maybe you can find something that you can have, that you can enjoy. All right, some other things that I always liked. I've come to like the lower hertz rate. The standard one, here's a Rolex 3131 and an Omega 3113. Interesting how they have very similar caliber numbers. And they both run at 4 hertz, which is 28,800 vibrations per hour. Okay, so what's good or bad about that? To some extent, 4 hertz is a little, probably in general, taking 2 watches, all other things being equal, probably going to get a little more accuracy. With the slower hertz, so you get longer time between services. They're generally required to have a little higher degree of work on them, I'll put it that way. Not always, though. Now, here are 3 watches, and they all have the 2.5 hertz, 18,000 vibrations per hour. There's the Unitas 6498-1. In the middle is the Wooten Landon Vinge 8, and then over on the side is one. It's called a platinum watch, and it's a platinum watch by a guy named David Walker. It uses as a base an Omega 269, whereas the Wooten Landon is one that he developed from the ground up. And one of the things about them is that they have larger balance wheels, and the thing that's good about a larger balance wheel is that they have a better inertia. In other words, they're going to stay steady, and that's one of the things you want for good watches. So these are some things, but here you have the Meister Stinger is relatively affordable, whereas the Wooten is $60,000, $70,000. And the David Walker is another one that's very expensive. But the point is that you can find them at reasonable rates. The same thing is true with 4 hertz. But the idea that maybe someday I'll find a Wooten I can afford. I'd sure like one. But in the meantime, I can find a lot of these other ones that do very similar things without the craftsmanship. Or I should put it this way, the level of craftsmanship. All right, now another thing are gears and hairsprings. One company, H. Moser, is that they always talk about their, what they call the Moser teeth. What? And the gears. And they're epicycloidal teeth. And they're ones that have, as opposed to these, sharp points going in and having some play, they have less play in there. Now, one that I find amazing, along with everything else they do, is a gear by Agenor called the Gear Without Play. And they have a little spring thing in the middle so that when the gear goes in there, it's caught in the spring and it doesn't, no play at all. There's interesting kind of stuff that's going on. Now, another thing from Moser was called a Strawman hairspring. And this hairspring is made in such a way and of such materials and so forth that it's very popular. They sell maybe 1,500 watches a year, but I think they turn out 50,000 of those hairsprings. And other these companies that are all done by hand probably use those hairsprings. One of the things you're going to find too is it's called a Breguet overcoil. Almost all, I don't know any hairsprings that don't use some version of that. There's a couple by Rolex. So one's called a Siloxy, and it's a silicon. Now they don't use that. There's the good things about silicon; they're very stable. The bad thing about it is they're very stable. You can't make any adjustments. Rolex has another one called the Parachrome, and it's doesn't have silicon, and it can be adjusted. And there's interesting kinds of stuff like this. And the Siloxy was not that particular spring, but the alloy that was made was a combination between Patek Philippe, Rolex, and what was the other one? Swatch. And so, that's something that is sort of interesting, is that 3 of these, they got together and have silicon. I don't like silicon in my hairsprings, and so I don't buy watches with them. Some people don't mind them at all. The reason I don't like them is they can't be adjusted. So anyhow, it's one of those things. But that's my choice. Other people think they're fine, and if you like them, you like them. If you don't, you don't. It's as simple as that. There's no like, oh, you gotta like this or you gotta like that, or boy, that's just dumb. All right. Now, on the dial, there's all kinds of different things on the dial. On the lower right down there is a Breguet, and it has a power reserve indicator down around 4 o'clock, 4 and 5, right down there. And it when it's fully wound, it's up to 38 hours, and it goes down to 0. I guess it's the minute hand above it is this little thing. It's called a serpentine hand. The hand above it with a little circle on the end of it, it's called a Breguet hand, Breguet watch. They're also somewhat bigger on Wooten Lanens. They're called apples. So there's some different things. There's all kinds of different things. Above that is a power reserve indicator from a FP Journe. What FP Journe like to do is that you start at 0 when it's fully wound. That indicates the number of hours since it was last wound. and then as it unwinds, it goes down. Now, why do it backwards? Well, in the early days, the seagoing chronometers, it was a matter of life and death. They made a big deal about that because they wanted to know when was this last wound, because they needed it for navigation. They needed a maritime chronometer for that. At the very bottom middle, you see a little circle down there is a little red in it. That's Nomos. They have a little thing that turns red as your time runs out. Right above that is the Meister Singer, and it has a single hand. And the indexes between the hours on there are the minutes, and it doesn't have a second hand on there. Some people like that. A very clean watch, and not one I'm particularly fond of, but it's still sort of a cool thing. The lower left down there is a retrograde movement that goes up and then back and up and back. That particular one is from a bi-retrograde by Harry Winston, and that's the second hand. So every 30 seconds it went like that instead of around. Right above that is what's called a hand date. That's on a Parmigiani toric, and instead of having a little window with the date, it's got another type of retrograde, and it goes to up to 31, then back to 1 again. Above that is one that's called a regulator. A regulator, that particular regulator by Laurent Ferrier. I love it, but I can't afford it. It's a $30,000-$40,000 watch. However, above that, over to the right, is another regulator by Steinhardt, and it's only maybe around $1,000. So you don't have to have a lot of money to have these different features. One I found one is a Chinese regulator, and it was $200, so brand new. And finally, at the sort of to the right of the Steinhardt is a very inexpensive watch by Orient, and at the top it's got this little power reserve indicator. So you have a lot of different kinds of things that you can, hey, I like this or I like that. You don't have to like what everybody else likes. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about is that you're going to have a successful watch collection. What's in it for you? Okay. One of the things is the status symbol. It's a Patek Philippe, and that's up there, and a very expensive watch with a world timer on it. Now, some people say, oh, well, status symbol, I don't need a status symbol. Well, in some situations, it may be something you do need. If you're doing international business, you want to look like you're doing pretty well, and instead of wearing some cheap watch. Of course, you could have the opposite effect, but for the most part, no. There's a status symbol doesn't have to be a bad thing. My son, who does a lot of expert testimony, was telling me about the attorneys he works with. They're very aware of it, of what's on themselves, what's on the other guy. Sort of use that as another thing for it is jewelry. Men, for the most part, don't wear much jewelry, and a watch is an okay type of jewelry. The one at the bottom down there, the little gold patrimony from Vacheron Constantin, very just simple watch, formal, go out, and that's the jewelry. You don't need a lot more than that. And at the bottom, watch can be a conversation piece. This one, the particular one, is a Tag Heuer Monaco with Gulf oil colors on it. It's just like a conversation piece, and it also has a chronograph in it. Now, up at the top there is a Omega Seamaster. I probably made it to a great extent. When I first started collecting watches, I don't know what it was. I still don't know everything, but it's a lot of fun to find out about. And I like all different kinds of watches for different things. And so the successful one, I think, is not what you're pushed into, or listening to people like me. I think, oh, you ought to get this or you ought to get that. What I think everyone needs to do to have a successful collection is learn as much as possible about the watch, the movement, every other part about it, because that's what makes it fun. Okay, well, that's it for today. Of course, I'd like to hear what you have to say, and you can tell me I'm all wet. You want to go out and get this watch and shut up, but I'd like to hear your ideas. What do you think would be what watch collection means to you, and why you like it? Be very interested to hear what you have to say. And until Sunday, when we're going to have, we're not having our usual review. We're going to have something a little different. There'll be a little review, but collection review. But there's also going to be. I want to talk about you really have a presentation about the Watch Time show that just ended last week. Till then, this is Bill Sanders for Watch Art Side, the Art and Science of Watch Collection. And as always, this is an invitation to subscribe if you'd like.